Hello, my name is Leo Riley and this is DUI 101. Today we're going to talk about diabetes and the impact that diabetes can have on a DUI case. This is a common problem now in DUI practice. You're running into diabetics all the time. In fact, it's estimated that by 2020, half of the United States is going to be diabetic. Right now, it's more than doubled just in the last 30 years. And a lot of that is because of diet, but there are also a persistent number of people out there who are diabetic for reasons of genetics. Basically, there are two types of diabetics. There's type 1, which is commonly referred to as juvenile onset diabetes, which is actually a misnomer. It has nothing to do with how old you are. And that's a diabetes that's caused by genetics. There's quite a bit of evidence right now that it's actually onset by a virus. Then there's type 2 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes can be caused in a number of ways. Women who are pregnant get type 2 diabetes. The most common way to get type 2 diabetes is just to let yourself go and put on lots of pounds. Get fat, and you're looking at type 2. Now, what are the diabetic incidents that can affect a DUI investigation? They come in two flavors. One is hypoglycemia, which is based on low blood sugar, and the other one is hyperglycemia. That's when you have high blood sugar. And there are a number of things about both of these conditions that can easily confuse a police officer. And trust me, I have a number of cases, including two rather major felony cases right now, where I can demonstrate that my client wasn't under the influence of alcohol, didn't even have a BAC that was high enough. The problem he had was diabetes. Let's start with high blood sugars, and let's talk about the ways in which those can affect an investigation. Basically, there are a number of ways in which someone with high blood sugar could be arrested mistakenly for a DUI. And the first one is that the driver's in a state of ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is actually a pretty dangerous event. It can result in your death. It can throw you into coma. There's all sorts of stuff that happens with it, but it's easy to tell if you're basically eligible to be in a ketoacidotic state. And that is that if your blood sugar levels come in at 250 milligrams per deciliter, if your blood sugar levels are 250 milligrams per deciliter or higher, you may have problems, and almost certainly you're a diabetic, and you need to see a doctor, and you need to get that documented. You need to go to a doctor immediately, and you need to have the fact of your blood sugar determined. Since it's untreated, we can assume that it was probably just as bad at the time that you were driving. And then you need to see a lawyer who is familiar with DUI practice. What happens is the body stops burning carbohydrates. In a ketoacidotic event, it stops burning carbohydrates and it starts switching to stored fat as a way of finding energy. And in order to do this, it's producing ketones. Now, ketones are on your breath. And if you give a breath test, it's not at all unusual for that machine to mistake elevated ketones for ethyl alcohol. The molecular structure of elevated ketones and ethyl alcohol is very similar, and they both behave in highly similar ways. What are the symptoms of ketoacidosis itself? Ketoacidosis, in and of itself, you're going to show drowsiness, flushed face, thirst, oftentimes an overpowering need to urinate, loss of energy, impaired coordination, rapid pulse, heavy breathing. In other words, many of the same symptoms that you'll have when you're drunk or when you're under the influence of drugs, which is also a DUI. So right off, you're exhibiting the symptoms of intoxication: drowsiness, flushed face, thirst, impaired coordination, dull mental alertness. Now add to this the fact that you have ketones on your breath and you're blowing high on a breath machine. you're going to be arrested, and if you don't do anything about it, you're almost certainly going to be convicted. I always find thirst amusing because most officers, when they see that you're thirsty, they figure that's alcohol that's making you thirsty, and oftentimes to test you, they won't give you water, and they'll just hang on for a bit to see if you get worse and worse. Well, if a diabetic's blood sugars are high, he's going to be thirsty. The body's screaming for water. And if he's untreated, he's just going to get thirstier and thirstier as time passes. So it's something to think about. Ketones register, as I've already said, as ethyl alcohol on most breath machines, especially those that use infrared analysis to determine your BAC. See if you can find out what kind of breath machine was used in your case. How does it measure your blood? Now, the 7110s that are out there, those are the Draeger machines. They use both an electrochemical fuel cell and infrared technology to test your breath. What you want to do is you want to look closely at those two numbers. And then you need to have an expert basically evaluate the ability of the machine to basically detect ketones and knock them out of the way. Most breath machines are actually pretty good at detecting acetone. Most except the Intoxilyzer 5000, which is in use in San Francisco as we speak, and in many parts of Southern California. But most of the modern breath machines can detect for acetone, and they're pretty effective. They're not very effective at all in determining whether or not you have ketones on your breath. What's another way that you can get ketones on your breath? If you're on the Atkins diet, you go through this induction phase of 2 weeks, and during that period of time, you're only eating proteins. You're basically eating meat. And what you do is you shed weight, because what happens is the body doesn't get carbohydrates, and so it switches over to stored fat to feed itself. And so you start shedding the pounds. It's not the best thing for your heart or for your overall health, but initially it's very effective. Elevated levels of ketone, they're absolutely required during the induction phase of the Atkins diet. In fact, if you read the book, he recommends that you get ketone strips to make sure that you're spilling ketones when you're urinating. So there are all sorts of different ways in which you can have elevated ketones, but certainly with diabetes, it can just be the natural condition of your body and your disease that remains untreated. Now, you can also find elevated levels of acetone on your breath, and once again, the Atkins diet. If you're losing weight at a rate of about a half a pound a week, you're probably burning it out of stored fat, in which case you're going to have acetone and ketones on your breath. Now, even though most breath machines can pick up acetone, and they can differentiate it from alcohol, most police officers cannot. Acetone leaves an odor on your breath. One of the famous things about the Atkins diet, for example, where you're spilling ketones and you have high levels of acetone, is that you have bad breath during that first 2 weeks. Well, to an uninitiated nose, that bad breath is going to smell like alcohol. I have 2 diabetic cases right now where both officers testified that my client had only a weak odor of alcohol. In fact, he didn't really have any alcohol in his blood at all. What he had was a blood sugar level in excess of 500. And that meant he was spilling ketones and acetone, and it also, along with the other evidence that we had in the medical testimony, we're able to establish that this gentleman was in a state of ketoacidosis. Okay, what about low blood sugar? This is a big one, and I have several of these cases as well. Low blood sugar, what happens is your body is starved for sugar, and it starts shutting down. You've got too much insulin in your blood. That's what's happening. And so your blood sugar levels are dropping, and they continue to drop. And for most people, and it varies from individual to individual, once you drop below 50, you're starting to be impaired by the disease itself. What are the impairments? Slow slurred speech, unsteady gait, delayed reaction times, bloodshot watery eyes, lack of balance, lack of coordination, impaired motor control. In other words, a DUI, somebody who's been drinking. But you don't have to drink to act this way if you're having a hypoglycemic event. I've had several clients now who have been involved in major traffic accidents, pulled over. They were a .07 in one case and a .08 in a separate case that I have. Both of them were charged with felony DUIs, their first offense. And in both cases, we found out that they were in a dramatic state of hypoglycemia. One of my clients had a blood sugar level of 33, and the other one had a blood sugar level of 31. This meant that they were on the verge of going into a coma. And the reason my client smashed into several cars and hit several pedestrians in one case and actually ran his car into a supermarket in another one was because they were functionally unconscious. Those can be easy cases to win if you know what you're doing. And so, you know, if you've had a diabetic event of any kind on the road, or if your blood sugar levels were low but not to the point where you were unconscious, but certainly to the point where you lacked balance, coordination, control, you had slurred speech, maybe you were confused, maybe you didn't know what was going on, you were uncertain as to time and place or personalities, this happens. So, you know, basically speaking, you want to take a close look at diabetes and you want to see how it could impact you. Now, what if you're not certain that you're a diabetic? What if you have no idea? There's a simple and easy way to find out. Go down to your local drugstore and buy a diabetic test kit. You can get a generic one from Walgreens or Long Supermarket for around $15. And they'll even throw in like 3 or 4 or 5 test strips for you to use. You only need one. Normal range for diabetics, or for non-diabetics, for people who are healthy and don't have diabetes, should be about 92, 93, 90, somewhere in that range. If you haven't eaten in the previous hour or two and your blood sugar levels are 150, 200, 300, 400, see a doctor. See a doctor immediately. And don't see any doctor, see an endocrinologist. They'll do a blood sample, but they'll quite frankly be able to tell almost immediately when you walk in the door whether or not you're diabetic. They'll probably need a blood sample to find out what kind of diabetic you are and to find out more about your diabetes. But diabetes to a professional is pretty easy to check out. And it happens a lot. I regularly ask clients whether or not they're diabetic, and I keep a test strip machine in my office and I'll offer it to them. And for those who are willing to undergo this small little finger prick, sometimes I come up. I mean, not only am I able to get the client off of the DUI, but we're able to get them to a doctor and get their condition treated. All right, that's basically it on diabetes. We're going to be doing a number of defense videos on specific defenses. We'll be talking about GERD next week, heartburn, things of that sort, acid reflux, and then the week after we're going to be doing a video on rising blood alcohol. If you have any questions, you can reach us at 408-283-0574, or you can visit our website at dmvcouncil.com. And thanks for watching DUI 101.